Previously, in the Church of the Messiah, last Sunday to be exact, we heard the first half of Hebrews chapter 11, sometimes called the Faith Hall of Fame, because chapter 11 tells us what faith is and then spotlights people in the Bible who demonstrate how to live that faith, making it the Faith Hall of Fame. It starts out in verse 1 defining faith, which is important because lots of people equate faith with belief. That's only half right. Hebrews says faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. It's confidence in what we hope for, that is, that God really is in control and He really is going to take care of us, and assurance about what we do not see, like God at work all the time, all around us. Faith is not merely belief, it's action based on what we believe. It's doing something with what we believe. Last week, in the first half of the chapter, we heard about Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, and Sarah. This week, we pick up with Moses and more in verse 29. By faith, God's people passed through the Red Sea on dry land. But when the Egyptians tried to do so, they were drowned. Now, you remember Charlton Heston as Moses raising his staff and parting the Red Sea in the movie The Ten Commandments. And if you don't remember him, maybe you remember Jim Carrey as Bruce Almighty parting the Red Soup. God's people are trapped. They have the Red Sea in front of them. They got Egyptian chariots behind them. And God says, no problem. He splits the sea apart with walls of water on each side and dry land in the middle. And the Hebrews run down the bank and across the bottom to the other side. And the Egyptians see it and they think, oh, if they can do it, we can too. And they drive their chariots down into the watery canyon. As the last of the Egyptians disappear into the seabed, about the same time that the last of the Hebrews are climbing up on the other side, Moses raises his staff again. The walls of water collapse on the Egyptians. The sea returns to where it was before, and all the king's horses and all the king's men drown. Now, why did the Hebrews make it across and the Egyptians didn't? It's because the Hebrews acted on their own faith and the Egyptians acted on someone else's. A sad reality is other people's faith won't save us. Each of us has to act and believe for ourselves. Now, if we have grandparents or parents who are believers and pray, if we have a spouse or a kid who's devout and prays, that's wonderful, but it won't save us. Now, we all know people who figure, well, my wife goes to church or my mom goes to church, so I don't have to. They're wrong. My dad was a dentist. My wife's a physical therapist. But that doesn't mean I know how to pull your teeth or teach you how to walk. Now, yes, let's pray for each other. Let's learn from each other how to live our faith. Let's encourage each other to do that. But borrowed faith is not faith at all. It's wishful thinking. Other people's faith won't save us. We have to believe and act for ourselves. Verse 30. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the army had marched around them for 7 days. Now, 40 years after this episode at the Red Sea, Moses is dead, and God has Joshua ready to lead the people into the promised land. The first obstacle they face is the city of Jericho, which is surrounded by walls several stories high. And the Hebrew army, it's whatever guys they have, carrying whatever sticks and rocks they could find as weapons. They look at the city and they think, there's no way on earth we can take this city. And they're right. They can't. But God can. And He tells them how. He says, march around the city once a day for 6 days. On the seventh day, march around it 7 times. And when you finish that last lap, blow your trumpets and scream, and the walls come tumbling down. And they think, yeah, right. That's about as likely as walking through the Red Sea on dry land. Wait a minute. We just did that. Okay, let's try it. And they do. Now imagine being on the wall in Jericho, watching the Hebrews coming across towards you. You've heard about these people and their God. You heard how their God killed all the firstborn sons in Egypt. You heard how God split the Red Sea for them. You heard how their God killed all the Egyptian armies. You're shaking in your sandals as they march towards you and then around you and then back away. And you're thinking, what? That's it? They're messing with us. They're just checking us out. They're coming back tomorrow and it's going to be really bad. Well, they do come back tomorrow and they do the same thing. And the same thing the next day and the next day. And by day 4 or 5, imagine the trash talk from the wall. Hey guys, we're over here. You know those spears in your hands, you're supposed to throw them. What are you trying to do, bore us to death? Now go away or I shall taunt you a second time. And imagine being one of the Hebrews. You're psyched that first day, and maybe the second, but by day 4 or 5, you're thinking, this is really stupid. And you can't even yell anything back to the people on the wall because Joshua tells us, God says, keep quiet. And by day 7, on lap 6.5, you're whispering to each other, see any cracks in that wall? Hear any thunder? Me neither. But then at the end of lap 7, the priests whip out their trumpets, everybody screams, and the walls collapse like those walls of water at the Red Sea. When God tells us to march around the city 7 times, let's march around the city 7 times. Not 3, not 5, not 6.5, but 7. Because faith finishes the assignment. Now, if God moved you to volunteer for something through the Messiah's Way for a year, don't quit now. The year's not up. Let's not stop until the year is over. If God prompts us to say or do anything, let's not quit until we say or do it all. If the Bible says give God 10% of our income, and it does, let's not slack off at 2 or 4 or 7 or 9%. Let's bring the whole tithe into the storehouse. Faith finishes the assignment. Verse 31. By faith, the prostitute Rahab, because she welcomed the spies, was not killed with those who were disobedient. Now, I'm not going to speculate why the 2 spies that Joshua sent into Jericho chose to spend their one night there in the house of a prostitute. Not going to go there. Maybe, I'm sure there's a completely logical and legitimate reason. Maybe they were both named John. But in addition to whatever deal they may have made with Rahab, she's heard about these Hebrews and their God and what he did in Egypt and what he did at the Red Sea, and she believes it. So she offers to help them escape the city if they promise to spare her and her family when they conquer the city. The guys agree, and because of Rahab's faith, her house is the only part of the wall that doesn't collapse when the walls come tumbling down. Faith saves us from God's wrath and from punishment. Now, people may mistreat us, people may persecute us because of our faith, but God won't. Now, this faith stuff is great stuff, and it gets better. Verse 32, and what more? I don't have time to tell about Gideon, Barak. You know that our former president's name is from the Bible, right? Okay. I don't have time to tell about Gideon, Barak, Samson, and Jephthah, about David and Samuel and the prophets who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the fury of the flames, escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned into strength, who became powerful in battle, who routed foreign armies, women received back their dead, raised to life. This is a job for faith man. God did all of that stuff because each of those folks acted on what they believed. Faith makes miracles. Sometimes. But sometimes not. Verse 35 continues. There were others who were tortured, refusing to be released so they might gain an even better resurrection. Some faced jeers and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. Ew. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains, living in caves and in holes in the ground. Yuck! You mean bad things happen to faithful people? Yep. All the time. Anytime anyone does anything good or generous or noble or righteous, somebody's not going to like it. Whether it's because they're mad because they didn't think of it first, or they're jealous because of the attention the faithful fella gets, or guilty because the other guy's selflessness shows how sleazy they are, no good deed goes unpunished. And if you don't believe it, there's your proof. If doing the right thing and loving people got everybody to like you, that never would have happened. And when we follow a guy who was nailed to a cross, we shouldn't be surprised when we get some splinters. Yes, faith makes miracles sometimes. But it also sometimes makes some people angry and produces problems. Let's get used to it. Because faithfulness is worth it. And there's a reward. Just not yet. Verse 39. These were all commended for their faith, yet none of them received what had been promised, since God had planned something better for us, so that only together with us would they be made perfect. Acting on what we believe pleases God and has rewards now. But the real reward comes later. At the end of our race, when we cross our finish line at death and go into our promised land, where there is no more pain or grief, no more death or disease, and God himself will wipe every tear from our eyes. Therefore, the lesson concludes, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith. In the stadium of life, running our race and living our faith is hard and long, but we don't run it alone. We are surrounded by a stadium full of all the saints already in heaven, praying for us, cheering us on. We have angels and archangels and all the company of heaven in the stands and at the finish line, waiting to welcome us into their presence, where we get to be with them and Jesus and each other and all the people we love forever. Now, with God's family reunion as our goal, let's throw away the unhealthy habits and attitudes that hold us back. Let's avoid the selfish choices and bad behavior that trip us up. And let's run our race with endurance, keeping our eyes on the prize, on Jesus himself, the perfect example of faith, showing us how to live what we believe. Now, we may or may not ever be inducted into the Faith Hall of Fame, but we can live like we will.